Syrianism. Some reconstruction projects in Syria are governed by development and real estate investment laws, which regulate new areas. Tal al-Zarazir and al-Haidariya in Aleppo are examples of that. In this video, we will present the most important points concerning Law No. 15 of 2008 and its implementation mechanisms. The law stipulates the formation of the General Commission for Development and Real Estate Investment and defines the Commission's objectives and responsibilities. The law also includes terms and goals for establishing real estate development zones. The law sets out the conditions for licensing real estate development projects and creating real estate development companies. The General Commission aims to regulate property development and encourage investment in the property development sector to increase its contribution to the construction process. It also aims to enhance the private sector's role and attract foreign investments to participate in real estate development. This is with the aim of supplying the housing and construction sector with required construction lands, establishing integrated cities and residential suburbs, addressing informal settlement areas, securing housing needs for low-income families on concessional terms. The Board of Directors of the General Commission consists of a Director General, a council of 12 members from different ministries and departments, representatives of the private sector, and a technical committee that studies the cases referred to it by the General Commission. This Board of Directors meets every 2 months and makes its decisions by majority. It is noted here that the decision-making process is kept under the purview of specialised state institutions, hence the local population and property owners are inadequately represented. This indicates an absence of the participatory principle of urban planning, and instead top-down decision-making has been adopted. The top-down approach also contradicts the global trends and international guiding principles of urban and territorial planning, which adopt a participatory approach with the local population in urban planning. The Board of Directors has wide-ranging powers, which includes proposing the formation of property development zones, proposing classifications of projects and determining the foundations of projects with societal dimensions, proposing the full or partial acquisition of property to create property development zones, granting the General Commission a property development company licence. According to the law, the property developer can be a Syrian civilian or legal person who works in the sector of property development, branches of Arab or foreign property development companies, Syrian limited liability, joint stock or joint venture companies to which the administrative authority contributes. However, the foreign shares of shareholders of these companies should not exceed 49%. The law permits the limited liability company to work in the domain of property development, notwithstanding that these companies give unfavourable guarantees to the non-contracted entity. For example, if the residents agree with such company to receive compensation for vacating their homes and the company does not fulfil its obligation, the resident would not be able to sue the company owners for their personal wealth, but would rather attain compensation in the form of owners' shares of the company, which may not be sufficient due to the company's low capital. According to Law 15, the General Commission can grant the property developer a set of benefits and concessions, in addition to tax incentives based on the Legislative Decree No. 51 of 2006. According to the General Commission's annual report of 2018, the number of property development licensed companies has reached 56, including public, private and joint venture companies. The General Commission classifies property development projects into 4 categories: priority projects, strategic projects for developing specific areas within a territorial plan. These projects aim to establish new housing projects or projects to address informal settlements, along with projects to secure compensation housing for those with demolition warnings, and housing projects for those affected by natural disasters. Projects with societal dimensions. Projects that aim to accommodate middle-income groups on concessional terms and in affordable units. Special non-touristic service projects, such as medical, educational or sports projects. In addition, it includes other property development projects which are licensed projects under Law 15, but do not meet the criteria of the aforementioned projects. But how do property development zones get created? The The Property Development Zone is created by a decision from the Prime Minister, which is in turn based on a proposal from the General Commission. The decision would be for 1. Providing or preparing construction lands to establish residential areas, 2. Demolishing, rebuilding or rehabilitating existing residential 3. areas, establishing special non-tourist service zones. The law does not limit the demolition and rebuilding of existing residential areas to informal settlements. Hence, the law permits the administrative authority to demolish and rebuild any area to create a property development with no restrictions. But on which lands would the property development zones be constructed? 1. Private state property that is not earmarked for a public entity. 2. Property that belongs to the administrative authority. 3. Property belonging to individuals which is being acquired to create a property development zone. 4. Property owned by property developers or private property owners who decide to cooperate with a developer to develop them. When determining property development zones, the Board of Directors of the General Commission considers that the zones should be located outside the prohibited areas or sanctuaries, such as military zones, airports, forests, and tourist zones. After that, the administrative authority implements the urban, housing, and master plans. This occurs either through privatisation or contracting with property developers based on mutual consent. The administrative authority or the property developer of such a zone is obliged to allocate 40% of the residential land for residential plots for sale to owners of the acquired property. In turn, the owners must reconstruct their properties in accordance with master plans, construction norms, and the time frame specified in the law of proportionate plot construction. The owners are liable for fines or reselling their allocated plot if they cannot meet the deadline. The owners whose lands are acquired receive a small sum of money in return, as per the evaluation process of the land. However, the proportionate plot derived from the acquired land will be sold back to the owners at cost without any profits. But the price of the proportionate plot, even if sold at cost price, may exceed the acquisition price. Landowners can appeal against the acquisition decision before the State Council, which is an independent consultative judicial body. As for private property owned by a property developer or owners of private property that cooperate with a property developer, the law allows the property developer to consolidate the development zone and redivide it into proportioned plots based on construction regulations in the Land Cadaster. The proportioned plots derived from a property development zone are classified as follows. Proportioned plots allocated for public buildings, including administrative authority centres, fire stations, hospitals, schools, and private facilities designated for public use. Roads, squares, parks, which are state-held public property. Plots designated for public service, ownership of which is transferred to the property developer based on an agreement with the administrative authority. These buildings include shopping centres, private educational facilities, hospitals, private medical centres, private sports facilities, private social care centres, and private tourist buildings. Residential plots, ownership of which is transferred to the property developer based on an agreement with the administrative authority. The property developer commits to the following: executing or rehabilitating the infrastructure and public facilities in the zone in accordance with the project's development plan, waiving the ownership of public buildings, roads, squares, parks and infrastructure for the administrative authority free of charge, securing suitable compensation housing according to the social survey, which should take into consideration the size of the plot that the beneficiary formerly occupied, or agreeing with the occupants on a reasonable compensation amount. This is considered a fair condition as long as the owner has the right to reject the evaluated compensation allowance, especially as the law stipulates that the owner should not be evicted from the property before receiving compensation housing. It is noted here that the law does not specify the location of the compensation housing, nor does it stipulate that it should be located within the property development area. This means that the compensation housing can be built anywhere and possibly far from the area which the occupier inhabited. The law does not address the possible financial obligations that the occupant could be subject to upon receiving the compensation housing. It also does not address the price assessment method or whether it is at cost or includes a profit margin. Sea-Urbanism puts forward that urban development and planning are important tools that can contribute to improving the urban experience. Law 15 is considered a pillar of urban planning in Syria. For it to be adopted as an effective tool in improving the urban experience, the authority should take into account the principle of local participation in decision-making processes. It should also address the lack of upgrade policies for informal settlements instead of demolition and reconstruction. The content of the law is also left open, as it allows for the demolition of residential areas which are not limited to informal settlements. Furthermore, authorities should take into consideration the payment of fair compensation for acquired land and ensure it is commensurate with the price of the developed apportioned plot. It should also clarify the location of compensation housing, as well as how and by whom it is paid for, while ensuring that the occupant receives adequate compensation housing.